13 minutes into a holiday flight, there was a bang, and the captain of this jet was gone. Not dead in his seat, gone. Torn out through the hole where his windscreen used to be. His body pinned half outside the aircraft at 17,000 feet in a 200-mile-an-hour wind, in air cold enough to kill. And for the next 20 minutes, the only thing keeping him from falling 4 kilometers to the ground was a pair of human hands gripping his belt. What ripped him out wasn't a storm or a bomb. It was a handful of bolts a fraction of an inch too thin, fitted the night before by a man with one of the best safety records in the building. This is British Airways Flight 5390. The day a cockpit window blew off in mid-air and very nearly took the captain with it. We're going to trace the exact chain of small mistakes that loosened that window, one step at a time, and stay till the end, because what the crew had to do to survive should have been impossible. Hold on to a man they were sure was already dead and not let go. "27 hours before the flight, the left cockpit windscreen on this aircraft was replaced. The job was signed off by the shift maintenance manager, and he did it himself. He was experienced. He had commendations for the quality of his work, but he didn't open the maintenance manual. He'd changed windscreens before, and he trusted his memory. On this aircraft, the windscreen isn't held in by cabin pressure, pushing it into a frame. It's bolted on from the outside by 90 countersunk bolts. Get those bolts right, and it's solid for years. Get them wrong, and nothing stops it leaving. To find the right bolts, he matched them to the ones he was taking out, like for like. He took replacements from a nearby drawer, held them up against the old ones, and they looked the same, close enough. He fitted 90 of them and torqued them down. Here's the trap. The old windscreen had been on the aircraft for 4 years, fitted before British Airways even owned the plane. And it had been put on with the wrong bolts too. So, matching the old ones didn't match the manual. It matched somebody else's old mistake. The drawer he reached into was mostly stocked with bolts a size too small, and there were only a handful of the correct ones left. When he was done, it looked perfect. It sealed. It passed. There was no leak, no warning light, nothing to catch. The aircraft flew out the next morning, believing it had a properly fitted windscreen, held in truth by bolts that could grip on the ground and nowhere near enough to hold against the sky. So how much too small is too small? How far off does a bolt have to be before it can throw a man out of an airplane? The answer is almost nothing at all. 84 of the 90 bolts were about 26 thousandths of an inch too narrow. That's 2/3 of a millimeter, thinner than a credit card. The other 6 were the right width but 1/10 of an inch too short, 26 thousandths of an inch. On the ground, that's invisible. It threads in, it torques down, it feels solid. But a cockpit window doesn't just sit there. As the plane climbs, the cabin is pumped up to hold a comfortable pressure, while the air outside thins away to almost nothing. That difference, only about 5 pounds on every square inch, presses outward on the whole windscreen, all the time. On a window this size, 5 pounds an inch adds up to tons of force trying to push it out. Bolts a fraction too thin can hold a window in still air. They cannot hold it against that. The morning of the 10th of June, 1990, Flight 5390 left Birmingham for Málaga, a Sunday charter, 81 passengers, 6 crew, an easy flight. Co-pilot Alastair Atchison flew the takeoff, then handed control to Captain Tim Lancaster. Both pilots loosened their shoulder harnesses. The cabin crew started serving breakfast. 13 minutes in, climbing through 17,300 feet, there was an explosive bang. The left windscreen, Lancaster's window, let go all at once, and the pressurized cabin emptied itself through the hole in an instant. Lancaster was ripped up and out of his seat, head first into the open air, his knees snagging on the control column, the only thing that stopped him going completely. The cockpit door blew off its hinges, slammed forward, and jammed against the controls. And the captain was now outside the aircraft from the waist up in the freezing slipstream at 400 kilometers an hour. A steward named Nigel Ogden had just stepped onto the flight deck. He threw himself forward and grabbed the captain by the belt, by the legs, anything, and held on. And here's the impossible part nobody is trained for. The obvious thing to do is pull him back in. But Atchison knew they couldn't. If they lost their grip and the body fell free, it could strike the wing, the engine, the tail, and bring the whole aircraft down. So they had to fly the plane and hold a man half outside it at the same time, for as long as it took. Atchison was now flying a depressurized, roaring, freezing cockpit, half blinded by wind, trying to make a distress call nobody could hear clearly over the noise. He pushed the nose down to get to thicker air where people could breathe. And behind him, the crew held on. Ogden was exposed to wind at minus 17 degrees. Within minutes, he had frostbite and a dislocated shoulder. As he weakened, the purser and another steward took over the grip, then traded again. Lancaster's body was being battered against the side of the fuselage, his head striking the metal. They were sure, by now, that they were holding a dead man. Atchison told them, "Keep holding, don't let go." He needed somewhere to land, fast. He chose Southampton. The runway there was short. The aircraft was still heavy with fuel for Spain, and there was no time and no system to dump it. He would get one approach, too heavy, onto a runway that was barely long enough, with a jammed throttle and a man hanging out the window. He took it. At 8:55 in the morning, 22 minutes after the bang, the wheels hit Southampton and the jet rolled to a stop. The crew were still gripping the captain, and then they felt it. He was moving. Tim Lancaster was alive. So what went wrong on Flight 5390? Not one big thing. A man who trusted his memory over the manual. A drawer stocked with the wrong bolts. A like-for-like match that quietly copied a 4-year-old mistake. A safety-critical job that one person could sign off alone, with no one required to check it. Every safeguard came down to a single pair of hands, and so did the rescue. Lancaster survived with frostbite, shock, and fractures to his arm, wrist, and thumb, and made a full recovery. He was flying again in under 5 months. The co-pilot and the cabin crew were decorated for what they did. The bolts were the cause. The people were the reason anyone lived. Because 13 minutes into an ordinary flight, the line between a routine morning and a funeral came down to 2/3 of a millimeter of metal, and to 3 people who decided that whatever happened, they were not going to let go.